Hello everybody and welcome to the first academic module in Autonomous Learning Environments. Module 1 is called Autonomy in ALI. This is one of the most important components of our course, and as we discussed, it's one of the most important components of our master's program. I invite you to reflect carefully during this module. Module 1, in here you're going to have the chance to think and learn about the different terms related to autonomy. You will also be capable of identifying self-regulatory practices that can take you and your students further in learning. Remember that our course has a sort of a concentric circle structure to it. So first we're going to analyze yourself as a learner, then we're going to analyze you as a member of the community, and later we're going to analyze you as a teacher and how you and your practices can affect and influence your students' autonomous behaviors and autonomous learning. The module competences are: reflect on issues regarding oneself as a learner, think critically about the necessary skills, abilities, habits, behaviors, and attitudes of a lifelong learner, and to reflect on the features and challenges to implement autonomous lifelong learning practices in diverse teaching and learning environments. I want to invite you to think about these concepts and realize that we are not only focusing on English language teaching, but we're focusing on learning in general. So the competences you're going to acquire in this module are going to be good not only for yourself as an English teacher, but for yourself as a learner of anything you want in life. So our Module 1 has some very important key concepts that we are going to analyze in the literature. The first and most important, of course, is autonomy, but then we have others that can be judged as different steps to take towards that autonomy, or simply different concepts that we are going to analyze through the readings. So one of them is self-direction, then the other one is self-regulation. I would like you to have a very clear difference between these two. Metacognition is one more, self-efficacy, technostress, technosis, 5-step model for self-directed learning. This is going to be found in Knowles. Self-observation, self-judgment, self-reaction, andragogy, multitasking madness, goal setting, and self-monitoring. I invite you to have clarity on these concepts since you're going to be quizzed on them. So let's take a look at learner autonomy, just a brief look before you get and delve into the readings for this module. For Hollick, autonomy is the ability to take charge of one's own learning. For Little, autonomy is essentially a matter of the learner's psychological relation to the process and content of learning. I would like to point your attention to the highlights we have in blue. Autonomy is a situation in which learners are totally responsible for all the decisions concerned with the learning and the implementation of these decisions. This is what Dickinson said. As you read these concepts, think about yourself as a learner and think about your learners. Looking at autonomy from Benson's perspective, he analyzes it in 3 different domains: autonomy as such, autonomy in learning, and autonomy in language learning. So for him, autonomy is people taking more control over their lives, individually or collectively. On the second level, he suggests that autonomy in learning is people taking more control over their learning. So in the first one, it would be situations in personal domains, but here in the second one, we're talking about more educational settings. Autonomy in language learning for Benson is people taking more control over the purposes for which they learn languages and the ways in which they learn them. So do you think your students have control over the purposes for which they learn the language you're teaching? Or do you think they are just, imposed and they just need to learn because they have to? Reflect on this, because when you reflect on these concepts, it makes it easy for you to think about your learners and plan for them. There is another important definition that we are going to read about, and it is Bucket and Heemstra's. Learner autonomy means that the learners are given the time and opportunity to think about how they want to go about their learning, techniques, resources needed, location, and pacing. which criteria will be used, and in what ways to determine whether the learning experience was satisfactory and worthwhile. I would like us to stop here and think about your lessons. Do you give your learners time and opportunity to think about how they want to go about their learning, or do you impose the curriculum on them? There are yet more definitions. This topic has been widely studied. Autonomy is the capacity to take control over one's learning. That's Benson, the one we just looked before. Learners who are involved in making choices and decisions feel more secure in their learning. Joyner cited in McCafferty. So here, as you can see, we're looking at involvement in making decisions and choices. So once again, I ask the question back to you. Do you give your students opportunities to make decisions in your classes, or do you impose everything on them? Noonan states that encouraging learners to move towards autonomy is best done inside the language classroom. We want them to do stuff outside, but what do we create in the classroom? What is the atmosphere and the environment that we provide them with so they feel they need to do something additional outside? And Warshauer 2003 argues that technology fosters autonomous learners. We are going to look into this a little bit closer in Module 4. 3, I'm sorry, I got confused. Because they are able to be responsible of their own learning through working on individual and collaborative projects. We're going to analyze how technology fosters autonomous learning, but that is just, a little idea we need to drop in here as well. One more important topic from our course is self-regulation. Self-regulation is the ability to use metacognitive knowledge strategically to achieve cognitive goals. So take a minute to think about that and how that would be done in real life. What about you? What definition of autonomy do you abide by? After watching this presentation and reading all the module readings, you should have a clear working definition of autonomy. One more definition of self-regulation. It is important to address the emergence of these research areas has been rooted in Bandura's work, Albert Bandura. Bandura's initial writings in self-regulation emphasized on behavioral and emotional regulation. Later, his work on self-efficacy indicated that motivation was an additional regulatory area. Something important to consider is that Bandura, Schunk, and Zimmerman, all these authors propose their ideas on self-regulation and self-regulatory practices from the field of psychology. This is interesting for us as educators. For Bandura, self-regulation emphasizes the reciprocal determinism of the environment on the person mediated through behavior. He described human functioning as the interaction between person, behavior, and the environment. Such theoretical focus in social learning theory places the emphasis on the derivation of knowledge from the environment. As you can see here in the citation, we're quoting Professor Liliana Cuesta in her postdoctoral and doctoral thesis called Fostering Self-Regulated Learning Through Didactic Scaffolding in a Professional English Blended System. Tied to self-regulation, we have self-regulated learning. Self-regulated learning requires learners to have a solid knowledge of the requirements of the task, as well as of the personal qualities and strategies needed to develop the task, Schunk. This is why I provide you with instructions from the very first day of class, and I also provide you with options. So you can, first of all, decide which one you want to work on, thus be autonomous, but also you can decide on the plan of action that you're going to follow by having everything set out from the beginning. So remember the key concepts for the module. We are going to work on all of these through the readings. Technostress and technosis are two things we didn't touch in this presentation. Also, andragogy and the 5-step model of self-directed learning, you're going to read in there. Remember that you need to construct your mind maps in a way that your classmates understand them and they are very clear. So that's why you're also doing the screencast to help your classmates understand your thinking. Okay, just a little quote and joke, for us to remember that we're going to be installing software on our heads this week through the readings. Thank you very much, and if you have any questions, don't forget to go to the Troubleshooting SOS forum and ask questions promptly. Good luck with Module 1.